Did you pick them because they were reliable or because they were remembered? The loud, confident, and the quiet, dependable one are rarely the same child. Charisma tells you who notice. Reliability tells you who can be trusted. Promises reveal intention. Completion reveals character. Every year, thousands of students in Singapore graduate with excellent results. And every year, the same question quietly follows them out the gate. Are they actually ready? I'm Ernest Tang. This is Beyond the Report Card. Let's go beyond. The charismatic student everyone remembers from assembly may not be the student you can trust to keep a deadline or finish a task. Every staff room already knows this privately. The loud, confident, and the quiet, dependable one are rarely the same child. And we all know which one tends to get the badge. We just don't often say it out loud. So think about the last student leader your school appointed. Did you pick them because they were reliable or because they were remembered? By the end of the video today, you will have a working way to tell the difference between a student who performs leadership and a student who can actually be trusted with it, and a practical step you can use this week to start selecting for the right one. Selection is the quietest decision a school makes and one of the most consequential, because whoever we hand the badge to, we are telling the whole cohort what leadership looks like. Here's the pattern. Schools default to charisma as a proxy for capability because charisma is visible. Capability is sometimes not. CCA leadership slots, prefectorial boards, student council elections, they all reward the same underlying trait: comfort in front of a room. Reliability rarely gets applause. It shows up in the small, unglamorous moments no one is filming. I've sat in sufficient selection panels across secondary schools here to see the same thing repeat. One student shortlisted, one speaks fluently, holds eye contact, tells a great story about an event they organize. The other is quieter, gives shorter answers. But every teacher on that panel whom they'd trust to lock up after a late CCA session independently, what they do is they name the quiet one. And more often than not, the confident student gets the badge. This matters most if you're an HOD or a CCA coordinator designing the next round of leadership selection, and for parents trying to work out whether the teenager's quiet dependability is actually a strength that schools will recognize. A selection process only ever finds what it's built to look for. Ours are mostly built to find confidence. So here are 4 markers I would put in their place. 1. Consistency over performance. Does the student show up the same way when nobody is watching? 2. Follow through over first impression. Do they finish what they start, including the boring parts? 3. Accountability over explanation. When something goes wrong, do they own it or do they explain it away? 4. Quiet contribution over visible contribution. Does the value depend on being seen? Every one of these looks completely different from the confidence-based checklist that most schools are currently using. Let's debunk them, or let's take them out one at a time. Reliable students often make stronger leaders than charismatic ones. Take a typical secondary 3 CCA committee. Some carnival week, the outgoing chairperson happens to be the most visible face. But ask the teacher in charge who actually confirmed the equipment bookings, chased the outstanding forms, and stayed back to pack up when the event ran late. You would normally get a different name. So this week, instead of asking who stood out, ask your CCA teacher in charge one question. Who can you count on without checking? Write those names down. The list is probably a real leadership pipeline. Charisma tells you who notice. Reliability tells you who can be trusted. Marker 1. Consistency over by their most. A student leadership is not defined by their best moment on stage. It's defined by their average moment off the stage. Charisma is situational. It appears when there's an audience and often disappears when there's none. Consistency in behavior is where it shows up in small, repeated choices no one is actually scoring. And a school that only observes students in formal settings is only ever measuring the performance and never the pattern. There was once a student leadership coordinator told me that she stopped trusting her first impressions after watching the same students in two different settings during the ceremony, the investiture ceremony, and the following Monday's flag raising duty. The students who showed up ready for duty were noticeably lesser than the ones who did impress her during the investiture ceremony. So track attendance and preparedness for the unglamorous recurring duties, not just the headline events. And parents, notice whether your teenager follows through on a small household responsibility without reminders. That pattern travels with your child into the school. So what do you need to do? Watch the Monday, watch the recurring, not just the visible ceremony. Marker 2, follow through over first impression. A strong pitch is not the same as a finished project. Students who interview or present well often front load their effort into the moment of persuasion, but follow through needs sustained attention long after the excitement and the recognition have faded. The gap between the proposal and the completion, that's where leadership capacity really gets tested, not the pitch. So during one of the school student council cycle, the most compelling proposal came from a student who by the end of the term had completed less than what was initially proposed in that proposal. Whereas a quieter student council member who barely made a big fuss about things, barely campaigned at all, had closed out every single one of her much less exciting, shorter lists. So when you're reviewing leadership applications, ask for evidence of one thing a student started and finished, not what they plan to do. And parents, notice whether your child completes commitments without being chased, especially the ones no one thanks them for. Promises reveal intention, completion reveals character. Marker 3, ability over a respond, or rather, how a student responds when something goes wrong tells you more than how they respond when something goes right. Here's the trap. Charismatic students are often skilled at reframing failure persuasively, and that can be mistaken as maturity. Genuinely trustworthy students tend to name their part plainly before offering any context. If we reward the smooth explanation over the honest ownership, we're training persuasion, not responsibility. So there was one incident where after a CCA budget ran over budget, a CCA budget. So there was a incident where a CCA event ran over budget and two committee members were asked to give an account of what happened. One gave a fluent, well-reasoned account of all the external factors, laying no blame on herself. The other simply said, I didn't check the final quote before confirming it. That's on me. The second student was promoted the following year, and the teacher in charge told me that that one sentence decided the promotion. So, in your postmortems and reflections, listen for ownership language before context language. And parents, when your teenager makes a mistake, notice whether they lead with I or lead with but. Trustworthy students say, that was me, before they say, but. Marker 4. Quiet contribution over visible contribution. Some of the most valuable leadership in a school is never seen by people making the election, or rather, the selection decisions. Visible contribution is easy to reward because noticing it costs us nothing. Quiet contribution, mentoring a junior, diffusing a small conflict, covering for a teammate, goes almost entirely unrecorded. And if a school only credits what's documented in the portfolio, it will systematically underselect for exactly the trait it says it wants. There was once a secondary 4 student who never held a single formal title in her 10 years of school. Her form teacher only discovered in her final year, her year for her secondary 4 years, that she had been quietly helping three struggling classmates every week, unprompted, completely undocumented. By every meaningful measure, she was one of the most dependable leaders in her cohort. She happened to also be pretty invisible on paper. So build in a structured way to ask peers, not just the teachers, who the students really are. And parents, ask your teenager not what they achieved this term, but hey, who did they help? Then listen for what they don't think to mention. If your selection process can't see quiet leadership, it isn't measuring leadership, it's measuring visibility. So charisma gets noticed, reliability gets trusted. Only one of them should really get a badge. Watch the Monday, not just the ceremony. You got to make promises reveal the intention, completion reveals the character. And if your selection process cannot see quiet leadership, it isn't measuring leadership. So here's a couple of action plans that you can take. Step 1, this week, ask every CCA teacher in charge one question. Who can you count on without checking? Compile that list before your next selection round. Step 2, review your current leadership application. If it only asks for students to describe achievements, add one question asking for evidence or something they started and finished without any kind of recognition. Step number 3, run a short anonymous peer nomination in your form class or CCA. Who would you trust with a responsibility when no one is really watching? And compare the result against the ones that your fellow colleagues, your staff, has got. The gap between these two lists is the most useful thing that you will look at for the entire term. Before we go further into this, the next video will be delving into what happens when leadership is tested by failure. Not charisma, not reliability in calm conditions, but how a student responds when a task collapses, a conflict erupts, or a plan falls apart. If this helps you to rethink how you select leaders, it might help you to rethink how the school trains them. And if you're ready to build a structured, experiential leadership program around these principles rather than relying on assembly talks alone, the link to our personal leadership programs that we have in our repertoire is found in the description down below. And if you happen to like such videos and you would like to listen out for more of these external school contexts, experiences that I can definitely provide for you, please subscribe to the channel, like the video over here so such content can get out to a lot more people out there. And if you have anything you'd like to comment on and you would like me to respond, please put them down in the comments box below because I do read them and I do comment on every single one of them. Thank you very much for your precious time being spent on this. Take care and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.